My name is Kendra Fisher. I'm 30 years old. And at what was supposed to be a family dinner, my sister Melissa physically hit me at the table and violently shoved me out the door, screaming, "Get out of my house!" while our parents Raymond and Beth sat cold and quiet, watching their daughter commit assault against me without saying a single word in my defense. What Melissa didn't know was that her house had been kept from foreclosure for 3 years by my $3,100 monthly mortgage payments, totaling over $110,000, and that 1 week after the assault, a package would arrive containing evidence that would destroy everything she thought she owned. I've spent the last 8 years building a successful career as a software engineer in Seattle, specializing in financial systems architecture for major banking institutions. My work involves designing secure transaction processing systems that handle billions of dollars in daily transfers, and the precision required for this type of development has trained me to think systematically about problems, documentation, and long-term consequences of decisions. The mortgage payments I had been making for Melissa started 3 years ago, when she lost her marketing coordinator position at a mid-sized advertising agency. The job loss hadn't been dramatic or sudden. Her employer had gone through restructuring that eliminated her entire department, giving her a modest severance package that covered maybe 3 months of basic expenses if she was extremely careful with spending. Melissa owned a small house in a decent neighborhood outside Portland that she had purchased 5 years earlier during the period when she was employed and financially stable. The mortgage was $3,100 per month, which was manageable on her previous salary, but became impossible once she lost her income. The severance money ran out quickly, and she began missing mortgage payments within 4 months of unemployment. I discovered the severity of her situation when she mentioned casually during a family dinner that she was having some temporary cash flow issues with her house payments. The way she framed it suggested minor inconvenience rather than impending financial disaster. But my professional experience with financial systems made me recognize the language people use when they're trying to minimize serious problems. "How many payments have you missed?" I asked directly, cutting through her vague descriptions of temporary issues. The question made her defensive immediately, as though I was being invasive rather than trying to understand the actual scope of the problem. "I don't know. Maybe 2 or 3, Melissa said, her voice carrying the irritation of someone who didn't want to discuss details. "It's not a big deal. I'm looking for new jobs, and I'll catch up once I'm employed again. The bank isn't going to foreclose over a couple of missed payments." But I knew from my work in financial systems that banks absolutely would foreclose over missed payments once they reached certain thresholds, and that the process moved faster than most people realized. 2 or 3 missed payments meant Melissa was approaching the danger zone where the bank would begin formal foreclosure proceedings. I called the mortgage company pretending to be Melissa, using information I had from previous conversations about her house purchase, and discovered that she had actually missed 5 payments and was in active pre-foreclosure status. The bank had sent multiple notices that she had apparently ignored, and they were preparing to file formal foreclosure documents that would begin the legal process of seizing her house. Without telling Melissa or our parents what I was doing, I contacted the mortgage company and arranged to begin making her payments directly. The process required some creative financial maneuvering. I had to get Melissa's account information and set up automatic transfers from my own bank account that would appear to the mortgage company as though they were coming from her. Have you ever made a major financial commitment to help someone while knowing they would probably never appreciate or even acknowledge the sacrifice? That's exactly what I did when I started paying Melissa's mortgage, understanding that she would likely resent rather than appreciate the intervention. The monthly $3,100 payments represented a significant portion of my income, requiring me to adjust my own budget and postpone personal financial goals like saving for a house of my own or investing more aggressively for retirement. But I couldn't watch my sister lose her home to foreclosure when I had the financial capacity to prevent it, even if helping her meant sacrificing my own financial advancement. What I didn't anticipate was how Melissa's unemployment would change her personality and her treatment of family members, particularly me. The job loss had triggered something in her that went beyond normal frustration or disappointment about career setbacks. She became increasingly bitter, resentful, and hostile toward anyone whose life appeared stable or successful. The resentment focused particularly on me because my software engineering career had been consistently successful while her marketing career had imploded. Every time we were together at family events, Melissa would make comments that were ostensibly jokes but carried clear undertones of hostility and judgment. "Must be nice to have job security," she would say, when I mentioned anything about my work. "Some of us don't have the luxury of sitting at computers all day making easy money in tech." The characterization of software engineering as easy money revealed how little she understood about my work, but correcting her would have only escalated her resentment. The hostile comments increased in frequency and intensity as her unemployment stretched from months into years. She interviewed occasionally for marketing positions, but always found reasons why the jobs weren't suitable. The salary was too low, the commute was too long, the company culture didn't align with her values. Meanwhile, she was living in a house that my money was preventing from foreclosure, completely unaware that her continued residence there depended on my financial support. Our parents, Raymond and Beth, had always favored Melissa in subtle ways throughout our childhood, but her unemployment seemed to intensify their protective instincts toward her while making them increasingly indifferent to my achievements or needs. Every family gathering became an exercise in managing Melissa's fragile emotional state, while my own experiences and challenges were dismissed as unimportant. "Kendra's doing fine," Beth would say if anyone asked about me. "She has her career and her apartment. Melissa is the one we need to worry about right now. Unemployment is so difficult, and she needs our support while she's going through this challenging time." The framing of Melissa as the child who needed support while I was fine and self-sufficient became the default family narrative. But what nobody acknowledged was that Melissa's challenging time was being financially subsidized by me while she spent her days bitter and resentful rather than aggressively pursuing employment opportunities. The family dinners where Melissa's hostility toward me would eventually explode into physical violence had been growing increasingly uncomfortable for months. She would make cutting remarks about my career, my choices, my apparent judgment of her unemployment, and my general existence as someone whose life hadn't fallen apart the way hers had. "You think you're so much better than everyone else," Melissa said during one particularly tense dinner about 6 months before the assault. "You sit there with your successful career and your financial security, silently judging those of us who are struggling. It must be nice to look down on people from your perfect life." The accusation that I was judging her was particularly frustrating because I had carefully avoided saying anything that could be interpreted as criticism of her job search efforts or financial situation. I had never mentioned that I was paying her mortgage, never commented on her lifestyle choices, never suggested that her unemployment was her own fault. But she had apparently decided that my mere existence as someone with stable employment was an implicit judgment of her failure. Raymond and Beth's response to Melissa's increasingly hostile behavior was to enable it by treating her outbursts as understandable reactions to difficult circumstances, rather than as inappropriate attacks on a family member who had never done anything to deserve them. "Kendra, you need to be more sensitive to what your sister is going through," Raymond would say after Melissa's hostile comments. "Unemployment is incredibly stressful, and she's dealing with a lot of fear and uncertainty. Try to be understanding instead of taking everything so personally." The suggestion that I was taking Melissa's hostility personally, rather than recognizing it as objectively inappropriate, revealed how deeply my parents were committed to protecting her from accountability. She could attack me verbally at family gatherings, and their response was to criticize me for not being more understanding of her stress. The breaking point came at a family dinner that had been organized to celebrate Raymond's birthday. Melissa had been drinking wine throughout the evening, and her comments toward me had been growing increasingly hostile and personal, as the alcohol lowered her inhibitions about expressing the resentment she clearly felt. "Why are you even here?" Melissa said suddenly, looking directly at me with obvious hostility. "You don't care about this family. You just show up to these dinners to make yourself feel superior, while the rest of us struggle with real problems." The accusation was so unfair and disconnected from reality that I initially didn't know how to respond. I attended family dinners because I cared about maintaining relationships with my parents and sister, despite the uncomfortable dynamics that had developed around Melissa's unemployment and resentment. "Melissa, that's not fair," I said quietly, trying not to escalate the confrontation. "I'm here because I care about family, not to judge anyone or feel superior. Don't give me that fake concern," Melissa shot back, her voice rising with anger. "You've been judging me for 3 years while I've been unemployed. Every time you show up here with your perfect life and your successful career, it's like you're rubbing my face in my own failure." The characterization of my attendance at family dinners as deliberately rubbing her face in her failure revealed how distorted Melissa's perception of reality had become. She was interpreting my mere existence as an attack on her, projecting her own feelings of inadequacy onto my presence in ways that made rational conversation impossible. "Kendra hasn't done anything to you," Beth said weakly, but her voice lacked conviction, and she didn't pursue the defense when Melissa's anger intensified. "She doesn't have to do anything," Melissa said, her voice filled with venom. "Just sitting there with her smugness is enough. Just existing in her perfect little world while I'm drowning is enough. I'm sick of pretending everything is fine when she's clearly looking down on all of us." The accusations were becoming more irrational and hostile, and I could feel the situation escalating towards something I couldn't control or de-escalate. Melissa was working herself into a rage that had been building for years, and my presence was apparently the trigger that would release it. What happened next would change our family dynamics forever and expose the violence that had been lurking beneath Melissa's resentful surface. The escalation from verbal hostility to physical violence happened so quickly that I barely had time to process what was occurring before Melissa's hand connected with my face in a sharp, stinging slap that made my ears ring and my eyes water. The shock of being hit was almost greater than the physical pain. I had never imagined that family dinner could deteriorate into actual assault. "Get out!" Melissa screamed, standing up from the table with such force that her chair fell backward. "Get out of my house! I don't want you here with your judgment and your perfect life and your condescending presence. Leave! Now!" The irony of being thrown out of her house by someone whose mortgage I had been paying for 3 years was almost overwhelming, but I was too stunned by the physical assault to articulate that fact. I stood up slowly, my face still stinging from the slap, and looked at my parents expecting some kind of intervention or defense. Raymond and Beth sat cold and quiet at the table, their faces carefully neutral as they watched their daughter commit assault against me without offering any verbal objection or physical intervention. The silence was more devastating than the slap itself. My own parents were witnessing violence against me and choosing to remain passive observers rather than defending me or correcting Melissa's behavior. "Did you see what just happened?" I asked them directly, needing to confirm that they had witnessed the assault and were consciously choosing not to respond to it. "She just hit me. Are you going to say anything about that?" Beth looked uncomfortable but said nothing, while Raymond studied his plate as though finding something fascinating in the remains of his birthday dinner. Their silence was a clear choice. They were prioritizing Melissa's emotional state over my physical safety, and they were willing to watch me be assaulted rather than risk upsetting her further. "I said, get out!" Melissa screamed again, moving toward me with obvious intention to physically force me out of the house if I didn't leave voluntarily. "This is my house and I want you gone. Leave and don't come back." I moved toward the door before she could escalate to more violence, but I turned back one more time to look at my parents. "You're really going to let her hit me and throw me out without saying anything?" I asked, giving them one final opportunity to demonstrate that they cared about my well-being. Raymond finally spoke, his voice flat and emotionless. "Maybe it's best if you leave, Kendra. Melissa is upset, and your presence is clearly making things worse. Go home and let everyone calm down." The characterization of my presence as the problem rather than Melissa's violent assault was the final confirmation of where I stood in my family's priorities. I was the expendable child whose safety mattered less than maintaining peace with the volatile sister who needed constant accommodation and protection. I walked out of the house I had been financing for 3 years, got into my car, and drove home while my face still stung from the slap, and my mind raced with the implications of what had just happened. My sister had committed assault against me while my parents watched with cold indifference, and she had thrown me out of a house that existed as her property only because of my secret financial support. The betrayal was multi-layered and profound. Melissa's violence, my parents enabling silence, the irony of being expelled from property I was paying for, and the realization that my family valued me so little that they would watch me be assaulted without caring enough to say a single word in my defense. Have you ever had a moment of absolute clarity about how little your family values you compared to how much you've been sacrificing for them? That's exactly what I experienced driving home from that dinner. Understanding that I had been pouring money into Melissa's mortgage while she cultivated hatred toward me, and my parents prepared to watch her express that hatred through violence. Over the next 7 days, I made decisions and gathered documentation that would fundamentally alter our family structure and force everyone involved to face consequences for their actions. The package I was preparing would expose 3 years of financial support that Melissa had been completely unaware of, document the assault that my parents had enabled through their silence, and initiate legal processes that would destroy the security Melissa had been taking for granted. The first step was consolidating evidence of every mortgage payment I had made for 3 years. My banking records provided comprehensive documentation of 36 monthly transfers of $3,100 each, totaling $111,600 that I had paid to prevent Melissa's foreclosure. Each payment was time-stamped and included reference numbers linking them to her specific mortgage account. I also had email correspondence with the mortgage company from 3 years earlier when I first arranged to begin making the payments. The emails showed that I had intervened when Melissa was in pre-foreclosure status with 5 missed payments, and that my financial intervention had been the only thing preventing the bank from seizing her house. The evidence of assault was equally well documented. I had recorded parts of the dinner conversation on my phone once Melissa's hostility had begun escalating, and the recording captured her verbal attacks, the sound of the slap, and her screaming at me to get out of her house. The audio was clear and unambiguous, providing undeniable proof of violence. I also contacted other family members who had been present at the dinner. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle James had witnessed the entire assault and had remained awkwardly silent throughout the confrontation. When I called them and asked if they would be willing to provide written statements about what they had seen, both agreed that the situation had been disturbing and inappropriate. "I couldn't believe your parents just sat there while Melissa hit you," Patricia said on the phone. "We were uncomfortable witnessing it, and we couldn't understand why Raymond and Beth weren't intervening. It was completely inappropriate, and I'll absolutely provide a statement about what happened." The witness statements would corroborate the audio evidence and eliminate any possibility that Melissa could claim the assault had been exaggerated or misrepresented. Multiple witnesses had seen her hit me and throw me out of the house, and they were willing to document that reality in writing. The legal components of the package required consultation with attorneys who specialized in both housing law and assault cases. The housing attorney explained that because I had been making mortgage payments on property titled in Melissa's name, I had created a complex situation that would require legal intervention to resolve fairly. "You've essentially been paying for someone else's house without any legal agreement or ownership stake," the attorney explained. "That means you can stop making payments at any time, but you can't force her to repay what you've already paid unless you can prove some kind of agreement or fraud. However, you can absolutely stop the payments immediately, and if she can't make them herself, the house will go into foreclosure." The assault attorney was more straightforward about my options regarding the physical violence. "You have clear evidence of assault, audio recording, witness statements, and the fact that your parents failed to intervene demonstrates the severity of the situation. You can absolutely press charges, and given the documented evidence, prosecutors would likely pursue the case." Over 7 days, I assembled a comprehensive package that would deliver all of this information to Melissa, Raymond, and Beth simultaneously. The package contained detailed bank statements showing all 36 mortgage payments totaling $111,600, email correspondence with the mortgage company from 3 years ago, audio recording of the assault, written witness statements from Patricia and James, legal notice of immediate cessation of all mortgage payments, formal eviction notice giving Melissa 60 days to vacate or assume the mortgage, documentation of criminal assault complaint filed with local police, timeline showing exactly how long I had been financing her house while being treated with escalating hostility. The package was designed to shatter multiple illusions simultaneously: Melissa's belief that the house was solely hers, My parents' assumption that their enabling behavior had no consequences, and everyone's apparent conviction that I would continue sacrificing financially while accepting verbal abuse and physical assault. I mailed the package on day 7 after the assault, timing it to arrive during a weekday when all 3 recipients would be home to receive it. The contents would make denial impossible and consequences unavoidable, forcing my family to confront exactly what had happened and what it was going to cost them. The response began approximately 2 hours after the package delivery, with my phone showing missed calls from Beth that would ultimately total 42 attempts before I finally responded with a single text message. The aftermath of the package delivery unfolded exactly as I had anticipated, with my family's panic escalating as they processed the evidence I had compiled and understood the legal and financial consequences that were now inevitable. Beth's 42 missed calls came with increasingly desperate voicemail messages that revealed her growing understanding of what the documentation meant. "Kendra, please call me back," the first message said, Beth's voice carrying surprise and concern. "We received your package, and we need to talk about this. There must be some misunderstanding about the mortgage payments. Please call us so we can discuss this as a family." The framing of documented financial support as a misunderstanding was typical of how my family approached uncomfortable realities, by suggesting that facts were somehow open to interpretation rather than accepting objective evidence. By the 10th missed call, Beth's messages were becoming more urgent and revealing more awareness of the actual implications. "Kendra, your father and I had no idea you were making Melissa's mortgage payments. We need to talk about why you didn't tell us and what your expectations were for this arrangement. Please call us immediately." The suggestion that I should have told them about the financial support I was providing revealed how disconnected my parents were from the actual family dynamics. I had been quietly preventing their daughter's foreclosure for 3 years, while they enabled her to treat me with escalating hostility, and their response to discovering this was to question why I hadn't informed them, rather than being grateful or acknowledging the sacrifice. By the 20th call, Beth's messages were becoming desperate. "Please, Kendra, we need to talk about this. Melissa is very upset about the package you sent. She says she didn't know you were paying her mortgage, and she needs to understand what's happening with the eviction notice. Please call us so we can figure this out." The revelation that Melissa didn't know I was paying her mortgage was darkly satisfying. She had been living in a house preserved from foreclosure by my money, while cultivating hatred toward me and ultimately committing assault, completely unaware that her housing security depended entirely on my continued financial support. Raymond's messages were fewer but more direct. "Kendra, you need to call us and explain what's happening. This package you sent is causing serious problems for Melissa. We need to resolve this situation immediately." The characterization of the package as causing problems, rather than documenting problems that already existed, revealed Raymond's priorities. He was concerned about the consequences I was initiating, rather than the assault and mistreatment that had motivated those consequences. But the most illuminating response came from Melissa herself, who left a single voicemail that oscillated between anger, panic, and attempts at manipulation. "Kendra, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this package you sent is ridiculous. You can't just claim you've been paying my mortgage for 3 years and expect me to believe it without proof. And the assault charges? I barely touched you, and you're acting like I attacked you. This is insane, and you need to stop whatever you're doing immediately." The denial that bank statements, emails, and recordings constituted proof revealed how deep Melissa's denial ran. She was confronted with comprehensive documentation of my financial support and her violence, and her response was to demand more proof while minimizing the assault as barely touching me. I didn't respond to any of the calls or messages for 3 days, letting my family absorb the full weight of the evidence and understand that their usual patterns of dismissing or minimizing uncomfortable realities wouldn't work when confronted with legal documentation and criminal complaints. The breakthrough in their understanding came when Melissa apparently contacted the mortgage company to verify whether my claims about payment history were accurate. The company confirmed that her mortgage had indeed been paid by someone other than her for the past 36 months, and that those payments had been the only thing preventing foreclosure proceedings. Beth's 38th voicemail revealed this discovery. "Kendra, We talked to the mortgage company and they confirmed that you've been making Melissa's payments. We had no idea you were doing this, and we need to understand why you didn't tell us. This is a very generous thing you did, but the way you're handling it now is cruel. Please call us so we can work this out as a family. The characterization of exposing 3 years of secret financial support as cruel, while making no mention of the assault I had experienced, revealed where my parents' priorities remained. They could acknowledge my generous financial sacrifice, but they were more concerned about how I was responding to being hit and thrown out than about the violence itself. By day 5 after the package delivery, the legal consequences were becoming more concrete and unavoidable. The assault complaint I had filed with police had been assigned to a detective who contacted Melissa for an interview about the incident. The eviction notice had been formally served by a process server, making it an official legal document rather than just a threatening letter. And most significantly, the mortgage company had been notified that payments from me would cease immediately, and that Melissa would need to resume making payments herself or face foreclosure proceedings. Beth's 42nd and final call came on day 6, and the message was different from all the previous attempts at contact. "Kendra, please. We're begging you to talk to us. Melissa can't afford to make the mortgage payments, and she's going to lose the house if you stop supporting her. We understand you're angry about what happened at dinner, but please don't punish her by taking away her home. We can work through the assault issue, but please don't let her lose her house. Please talk to us." The message revealed that my family had finally grasped the full scope of what was happening. Melissa was facing both criminal assault charges and imminent foreclosure, and the two consequences were directly connected to her violence against the person who had been secretly financing her housing security. Have you ever watched people finally understand that their treatment of you had been destroying the very foundation of stability they'd been taking for granted? That's exactly what was happening. As my family realized that Melissa's assault against me meant losing the financial support that had been preventing her foreclosure for 3 years. On day 7, I finally responded to the communication barrage, but not with the conversation my family was expecting. I sent a single text message to the group chat that included Melissa, Raymond, and Beth. "Get out, now." The 3 words echoed Melissa's command to me during the assault, using her own language to communicate that she would be leaving the house she had considered hers while I remained uninvolved and unmoved by whatever panic or hardship my withdrawal of support would create. The response to my text was immediate and desperate. Within minutes, Beth was calling again. Raymond was texting paragraphs of explanation and justification, and Melissa was sending messages that alternated between threats and pleading. "You can't do this to me," Melissa texted. "I'll sue you for all the money you claim to have paid. You can't just trap someone by secretly paying their bills and then demanding they leave their own house. This is illegal." The threat of legal action revealed Melissa's continued denial about the actual legal situation. She had no grounds to sue me for stopping voluntary payments on her mortgage, and her house wasn't hers in any meaningful sense, given that she couldn't afford to maintain it without my support. "Kendra, this is going too far," Raymond texted. "We understand you're upset about the incident at dinner, but destroying your sister's housing security is disproportionate. We can arrange family counseling to work through these issues, but please don't force Melissa into homelessness." The characterization of stopping mortgage payments as destroying Melissa's housing security rather than acknowledging that I had been creating that security in the first place revealed Raymond's continued inability to see the situation clearly. But I had made my decision, and nothing my family could say would change the consequences that were now unfolding. The mortgage payments stopped immediately, the assault charges proceeded through the legal system, and the eviction process moved forward according to the timeline established by housing law. 60 days after the package delivery, Melissa was legally required to vacate the house or face forcible removal by sheriff's deputies. The mortgage company had begun formal foreclosure proceedings when she failed to make any payments herself, and the property was scheduled for auction to recover the bank's losses. The house that Melissa had violently defended as hers was about to be taken by the bank, and the assault that had precipitated this consequence was being prosecuted as a criminal matter that would result in a permanent record regardless of whether she received jail time or probation. Meanwhile, I used the $3,100 per month I had been spending on Melissa's mortgage to purchase a new home for myself in a neighborhood I had always wanted to live in. The house was larger and nicer than anything I could have afforded while supporting Melissa, and I furnished it carefully with the knowledge that my family would never be invited to visit or see what I had built with the money I was no longer wasting on someone who had repaid financial rescue with physical assault. The final chapter in my family's story came 6 months after the assault, when the legal and financial consequences had fully resolved. Melissa had been convicted of assault and sentenced to probation with required anger management classes. She had lost the house to foreclosure and was living in a small apartment she could barely afford on unemployment benefits and occasional freelance work. Raymond and Beth had attempted several more rounds of contact trying to negotiate some kind of family reconciliation, but each attempt revealed that they still didn't understand or accept responsibility for their role in enabling Melissa's violence through their cold silence during the assault. "We want our family back together," Beth wrote in an email. "What happened at that dinner was unfortunate, but we're all family, and we should be able to move past these difficulties." Kendra, you've made your point about the mortgage payments. Everyone understands now that you were supporting Melissa financially. But continuing to maintain this distance is hurting all of us. The characterization of witnessing your daughter commit assault against your other daughter as unfortunate revealed how deeply my parents were invested in minimizing what had happened rather than confronting their own complicity through their silence and inaction. I responded to the email with a final message that established permanent boundaries. "You sat cold and quiet while Melissa hit me and threw me out of a house I had been paying for. That silence revealed exactly what I mean to you, compared to what she means to you. I'm not interested in rebuilding relationships with people who will watch me be assaulted without caring enough to say a single word in my defense. Get out of the life I've built without you." If you're reading this and you're dealing with family members who enable violence against you, who watch you be assaulted without intervening, who take your financial support for granted while treating you with hostility and resentment, please know that you don't owe those people continued access to your money or your life. Physical assault is never acceptable regardless of stress or circumstances, and people who enable violence through their silence are complicit in that violence. Sometimes the best response to being told to get out is forcing everyone involved to get out of the life you've been secretly funding. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.